Can you feel the sweet and metallic taste bleeding silently into your gums right now? The year is 1845, and you are aboard the HMS Erebus, the absolute and invincible glory of the British Royal Navy. You represent the pinnacle of human advancement. Steam engines pulse beneath your feet. Central heating systems promise to master the cold. You are hunting the mythical Northwest Passage. Victory seems like a mere bureaucratic formality. But the Arctic doesn't care about imperial pride. Victoria Strait is not just frozen water. It is a thermal trap perfectly designed to devour human arrogance. The ice closes around your oak hull with a deafening scream. The sound of crushed wood echoes in the darkness. You are trapped, not for days, but for years that will crawl in a perpetual twilight. The cold outside reaches 50 degrees below zero, a temperature that defies the very physics of organic life. Your breath freezes even before touching the collars of your wool coat. The polar darkness embraces your ship. The absolute silence is only broken by the cracking of the monstrous ice. You trust in the infinite provisions stacked in the dark hold. 8,000 tin cans gleam under the flickering light of the lamps. It is your bottled salvation, modern technology ensuring your survival against the primordial elements. But you don't know what hides in those thick welds. You ignore the invisible poison already running through your anesthetized veins. Thermodynamics and toxicology have begun a sadistic game with your body. There are no heroes in this infinite white vastness, only human flesh slowly losing the war against the fundamental laws of the universe. The nightmare won't come from the ice outside. The true horror is already devouring your mind from the inside out, and you're about to find out why. You look at the white vastness and realize that the Victoria Strait is an alien desert. You were sent here to conquer the world's geography. The Royal Navy demanded the Northwest Passage, a mythical trade route that would connect the Atlantic to the Pacific. You were supposed to be the master of modern navigation. But the geography of this frozen hell laughs at your detailed nautical charts. The ice here is not flat and serene like in the lakes of England. They are tectonic blocks of frozen freshwater colliding violently, irregular walls that rise like white tombstones under the starless sky. You walk across the deck, trying to find a crack in the horizon. Everything is white, a brutal blindness of snow and despair. The wind cuts your face with microscopic razors of ice crystals. You feel the caloric energy being violently ripped from your core. Thermal physics is implacable. To keep your organs functioning, your body demands continuous heat, but the minus 50-degree cold is a thermal black hole. It sucks out your life. You begin to shiver violently. Your muscles try to generate internal friction. It is a losing battle. Geography has isolated you from any hope of rescue. There is no civilization for thousands of kilometers of crystallized desolation. You are surrounded by an architecture of ice that crushes heavy ships like paper toys. Among the crew, you observe the young stoker John Torrington. He is only 20 years old. Torrington coughs violently beside you, clutching his hunched chest. His eyes reflect a deep terror that you try to hide from yourself. He should be feeding the enormous boilers, but the sudden weakness has transformed this strong young man into a pale specter. Torrington's body is collapsing rapidly under the weight of the toxin, and as you watch the bizarre and inexplicable decline of your deckmate, a dark question forms in your increasingly confused mind. What is silently killing the healthiest men on the ship even before the cold touches them? You hold John Torrington's hand as life leaves him in the makeshift infirmary. He is only 20 years old, but his body seems to have aged decades in a few months. You see the cold sweat trickling down his feverish forehead. The young man's muscles are completely atrophied. Torrington's mind no longer inhabits this world of ice. He mutters incoherent words about ghosts and shadows lurking in the corners of the ship. Paranoia has taken hold of him. And most terrifying of all is that you begin to see the same shadows. Your daily routine turns into a lethargic delirium. You wake up exhausted. The fatigue is not normal. It is a lead anchor dragging your consciousness into the abyss. You walk to the damp mess hall to receive your survival ration. The cook opens another of the 800 cans of soup and salted meat. You swallow the pasty mixture hungrily. You try to ignore the drops of silver solder floating in the thin broth. It's the lead. The cans were hastily sealed in a cheap and lethal way. With every meal, you consume the heavy metal that destroys your neural network. Extreme fatigue dominates your limbs. Your cognitive failure becomes evident when you forget how to tie a simple knot. You look at your own hands, and they tremble uncontrollably. Neurological poisoning dissolves your sanity drop by drop. Strong men around you cry for no apparent reason. Respectable officers scream at the wind. Military discipline crumbles in the face of slow, invisible poisoning. Lead replaces the calcium in your bones. It blocks the synapses of your exhausted brain. You are literally going crazy in the dark. Psychological disintegration precedes complete biological failure. But as your mind gets lost in the toxic haze of heavy lead, your body begins to undergo an even more grotesque and painful metamorphosis that will turn your own skin into your worst enemy. You feel a constant taste of blood filling your dry mouth. The ship's hierarchy has lost all meaning. Captain Sir John Franklin is dead. Command has been passed on. But authority is an illusion in this polar hell. You are forced to march through the infinite ice, pulling heavy sleds. Hundreds of kilos of useless wood and iron. The officers demand military discipline. They order you to drag oak desks and silver plate across the virgin snow. It is the insanity of British command, refusing to accept defeat. You pull the rough ropes, the tension breaks the limits of your fragile body. The absolute absence of vitamin C awakens a sleeping monster in your biology. Scurvy strikes. You feel your gums swell until they completely cover your rotten teeth. One by one, they fall onto the white snow. You spit them out along with dark clots. The collagen that holds your body together simply ceases to exist. It is biological disintegration in real time. You look at your arm and see something impossible. That childhood scar, healed for decades, suddenly opens up. The skin tears by itself. Old wounds bleed again, as if they had just been made. The pain is excruciating. Internal hemorrhages transform your legs into swollen purple trunks. Every step on the ice is pure agony. The movement tears your muscles from the inside. The officers are also rotting alive. The tension between the survivors reaches catastrophic levels. Men maddened by lead and disfigured by scurvy look at each other with hollow eyes. The moral compass of civilization broke along with the ship's thermometers. You realize the provisions are gone. Hunger tears at your stomach with invisible claws. Thermodynamics demands fuel, and as you watch your comrades fall dead in the blood-stained snow, a primitive and forbidden thought begins to dominate your sick brain. You are lying on the dirty ice crust, shivering uncontrollably. The extreme cold of 50 degrees below zero is no longer just a temperature. It is a predatory entity. Thermal physics is taking its final toll. Without external calories, your body makes a brutal decision. It begins to consume itself. You feel autophagy in real time. Your organism devours its own muscle mass to keep your heart beating for a few more hours. Your arms are just bones covered in grey, torn skin. Hunger blinds you. It silences the pain of reopened wounds. It quiets the paranoia of lead poisoning. Only the animalistic instinct for survival remains. You look at the frozen corpses of your companions, men with whom you laughed and drank in the ports of London. Now, they are just meat. Humanity's supreme taboo is crushed by the weight of thermodynamics. You and the few survivors approach the bodies with trembling knives in your wounded hands. There is no hesitation. Madness has eliminated guilt. You cut the hard, frozen skin. The blades scrape violently against human bones. It is a hollow and terrifying sound. Cannibalism is not just an act of wild desperation. It becomes ritualistic, a macabre ceremony of survival at the end of the world. You break the femurs of your brothers in arms. You need to extract the calorie-rich bone marrow. Modern forensic examinations will find these same knife marks on the abandoned bones centuries later. They will see the surgical precision of your hunger. You chew the raw, frozen meat of your best friend. The metallic taste mixes with the dark blood. Civilization has evaporated. You have become a scavenger predator in the ruins of the greatest naval expedition in history. But even after committing the supreme sin to feed the furnace of your destroyed body, you will soon realize that the Arctic demands a sacrifice much greater than your humanity. You fall into the red-stained snow for the last time. The human flesh you swallowed in desperation was not enough to stop the thermodynamic black hole. Metabolism collapses. Your body finally gives up the impossible war. The polar cold invades your lungs in an absolute and lethal way. Your heart fails in the deafening silence of the Victoria Strait. 129 men perished. The unquestionable elite of the British Royal Navy disappeared. Everyone was reduced to fragmented skeletons, scattered across a land without forgiveness or mercy. There was no heroic last-minute rescue. There was no military glory or imperial conquest for schoolbooks, only flawless physics and toxic chemistry operating their unbreakable laws on extremely fragile human biology. The Franklin expedition quickly became the greatest disaster in the history of polar exploration, a colossal tomb of ghost ships and bones marked by desperate blades. The cheap lead from the tin cans corroded the brilliant minds. The relentless advance of scurvy undid the perfectly trained bodies. The extreme cold simply devoured the arrogant souls. You were part of humanity's ultimate nightmare, where modern technology and arrogance failed miserably before the brutal and indifferent power of primordial nature. Centuries later, the ice would melt enough to return your remains to modern researchers. Cracked skulls and scraped femurs would tell the true silent story of your absolute despair. The romantic myth of British heroism would be forever replaced by the raw reality of cannibalism and toxic madness. The Arctic never forgives human pride. It only freezes it in time to serve as an eternal warning to the living. The polar darkness finally covers your eyes, open forever. White silence reigns absolute once more under the lights of the Aurora Borealis. Subscribe to this channel if you have the courage to keep walking through the forgotten shadows of humanity, for history is a deep abyss that always returns your terrified gaze.